is Radio Prague International, coming to you from the Czech capital.
Hello and welcome. I'm Anna-Marie Regner and you're listening to Czechia in 30 Minutes, the show where we give you a rundown of what's recently been happening in the country in just half an hour. Coming up on today's program, Czechia marks the 84th anniversary of the destruction of Lidice, one of the Nazis' most brutal reprisals during World War II. What can 17 million library loans tell us about Prague's readers? We ask data journalist Michal Kašpárek, and we'll talk about a new online platform that helps released prisoners to rebuild their lives. All that coming up later. But first, here are today's top headlines brought to you by Vít Pohanka.
News.
Jaromír Zuna, for Freedom and Direct Democracy Party, is seeking to increase Czech defense spending to 2% of GDP next year, equivalent to 190 billion Czech crowns. According to Czech television, the proposal would raise the ministry's budget by 35 billion crowns compared with this year. The defense ministry is currently operating with 155 billion Czech crowns, or just under 1.8% of GDP. NATO members have pledged to spend at least 2% of GDP on defense, while last year's Alliance Summit also endorsed the long-term goal of increasing overall defense and security spending to 5% of GDP within 10 years. Had the seventh lowest inflation rate in Europe in May, according to an analysis by investment company Portu. Consumer prices rose by 2.1% year-on-year, improving the country's ranking from 10th place in April. Inflation was higher in all neighboring countries, reaching 2.6% in Germany, 3.1% in Poland, 3.7% in Austria, and 3.9% in Slovakia. Romania recorded Europe's highest inflation at nearly 11%, while Switzerland and Liechtenstein had the lowest of 0.6%. Inflation in the Eurozone rose to 3.2% in May. The state-owned Czech energy giant ČEZ will build a large pumped storage hydropower plant at the Orlík reservoir in central Bohemia, creating the country's fourth facility of its kind. The project is part of 8 billion crowns modernization of the existing power station and is due for completion in 2033. Once upgraded, the plant will be able to pump water from the lower Kamík reservoir back to Orlík, storing up to 750 megawatt-hours of electricity, enough to cover the daily electricity consumption of around 80,000 Czech households. Construction is expected to begin next year. Prague court has given a 20-year-old man a 5-month suspended prison sentence for threatening to carry out a school shooting and expressing approval of the 2023 mass shooting at the Faculty of Arts of Charles University. The court also ordered a 20-month probation period, during which he will be supervised by a probation officer and undergo psychological counseling. Prosecutors said the defendant repeatedly threatened classmates and brought weapons such as knives and telescopic baton to school. He denied the charges and has appealed the verdict. Skater Metodě Jílek has received the Jiří Gutjarkovský Award for the country's most outstanding athletic performance of 2025. The 20-year-old, who won Olympic gold and silver at the Milan Winter Games in February, was chosen by fellow athletes and members of the Czech Olympic Committee. Jílek also claimed silver in the 10,000 meters at the World Championships in Hamar, won his first World Cup races and secured the overall World Cup long-distance title. He is only the second speed skater to receive the award, following 3-time Olympic champion Martina Sáblíková. The National Panel of Experts has concluded that Prague's historic railway bridge beneath Vyšehrad can be restored and remain in service for at least another 100 years. Commissioned by the National Heritage Institute, the group voted 8-1 in favor of repairing rather than replacing the steel structure. The experts recommend dismantling the bridge during restoration, replacing or reinforcing damaged components, and maintaining it regularly with renewed anti-corrosion protection. To increase rail capacity, they suggest building a separate third track alongside the existing bridge while preserving the original historic structure. Thursday will be mostly overcast with rain in places. Daytime highs will range between 14 and 18 degrees Celsius, reaching up to 20 degrees in South Moravia.
84 years ago, on June 10, 1942, the Nazis annihilated the central Bohemian village of Lidice in retaliation for the assassination of acting Reich protector Reinhard Heydrich by Czechoslovak paratroopers. In one of the most brutal reprisals of World War II, they shot 173 men, deported the women to concentration camps, and murdered most of the children or took them away for Germanization. The village was razed to the ground. Daniela Lazarova with that report.
Generál Heydrich oblíbil si naši zemi, byl naším přítelem, těšili jsme se.
General Heydrich had come to like our country. He was our friend. We looked forward to the time when he would remember the Czech nation fondly and support its people. Fate, however, decided otherwise, allowing the criminals in London to murder, here among us, the most distinguished representative of the Reich.
Nejvýznamnějšího příslušníka říše.
After the attack on Heydrich, Nazi propaganda went into overdrive. This is how Protectorate Radio broadcast at the time. A state of emergency came into force. The Gestapo carried out arrests and executions, and on June 9th, soldiers surrounded Lidice and sealed off the village, looking for links to the paratroopers. Preserved in the archives of Czech radio are the memories of Milada Cábová, who was 18 years old at the time.
No one was allowed in. Every house was searched. 2 soldiers came in, saying they were going to inspect the house, and they went from the cellar right up to the attic. Of course, they found nothing.
Lidice was encircled by Wehrmacht soldiers. Shortly after midnight on June 10th, they began forcing residents from their homes. The women and children were taken to the building of the grammar school in Kladno. Men over the age of 15 were gathered at the Horák family farm, where they were shot in groups. At the same time, soldiers began setting fire to the houses. In the morning, Karel Hermann Frank personally arrived in Lidice. A few days later, the Nazis took the children away from their mothers. Milada Cábová says it is impossible to erase the horrific scene from memory.
It was something terrible. Those little children clung to their mothers, crying, "Mummy, don't give me away. I don't want to leave you." The guards shouted, fired warning shots, and dogs barked all around.
82 children were murdered by the Nazis in specially adapted gas vans on their way to the extermination camp in Chełmno. The women ended up in the Ravensbrück concentration camp. They learned the fate of their children only after the war, as well as the fact that all the men of Lidice had been executed. Jaroslava Skleničková recalled her final farewell to her father.
To this day, I have never come to terms with my father's death. He was 50 years old, and I think he sensed what was coming. At the gate, he said to me, "God willing, we shall see each other again."
The Nazis made no attempt to conceal the destruction of Lidice, and news of the atrocity spread immediately not only throughout the Protectorate but across the world. From London, the head of the Czechoslovak government in exile, Edvard Beneš, condemned the murders.
They are killing innocent people en masse, according to lists prepared months and years in advance. The village of Lidice, which will surely one day become a place of pilgrimage for the entire nation, has been barbarically devastated and razed to the ground. This is how the rulers in Berlin present the German nation and state to the world. For all of this, they will be held accountable and punished.
In memory of the destroyed village, a number of towns and villages around the world were renamed Lidice. Shortly after liberation, the site of the tragedy was turned into a memorial area. In 1946, the Society for the Renewal of Lidice was established, and at the turn of the 1940s and 50s, authorities built 150 family houses. The site of the original village of Lidice is today a national cultural monument. The victims of Lidice will be commemorated on Friday, June the 12th, with a Thanksgiving concert in the courtyard of the museum. The programme will also include the lighting of candles, which people will place at the sites of the original Lidice homes. According to Mayor Veronika Kellerová, there is great interest in the event and all the candle locations have already been reserved.
Daniela Lazarová with that report. The Czech Republic boasts one of the densest library networks in Europe. But who exactly uses these libraries, and what do their reading habits look like? Drawing on data from roughly 17 million loans made over the 3 years of Prague's municipal library, data journalist Michal Kašpárek uncovered a number of intriguing patterns. At what age do women and men read the same books? Who are the library's super users, and how do readers' interests change over the course of the year? Ruth Franková spoke to Kašpárek about what the data revealed.
Of all the patterns hidden in the data, was there anything that really took you by surprise?
Not much, really. It doesn't happen often that an analysis basically only confirms what I have already known before. So let's go through some maybe bits of interesting information. For example, there was one funny thing. I was quite surprised that little kids from 6 to 10 read quite a lot about etiquette, about good manners. So it goes against the picture of rude teens, maybe. Another thing that I found funny was the popularity of topics like the wives of kings and the mistresses of kings among people older than 50 years. And it starts with the wives around 45 years of age, and then let's say 10 or 15 years later, people start to be interested in the mistresses. I don't know why.
Previous researches have shown that women tend to use libraries more than men, but your analysis identified one age when boys and girls borrow books at almost exactly the same rate. When is that, and why do women subsequently borrow significantly more books than men?
The ratio is 1-to-1 from, let's say, 6 to 10 years of age, and it is because the schools organize trips to libraries. Kids are given a free card. They don't have to pay for it until 15 years of age, I guess. But after the age of 10, girls stay interested in reading quite more, and the biggest gap is at the age of 35. There are several women readers to one male reader at that age.
And do women and men eventually return to more or less the same rate?
It gets closer with age, let's say from 50 years of age, but it never returns to the 1-to-1 ratio.
You also found that men and women read remarkably similar books around the age of 18, but then their reading preferences diverge sharply afterwards. So why do their tastes come together at that age, and what causes them to drift apart later?
It is quite easy to explain. At age 18, both boys and girls, or actually young men and young women, have to read the same books for state exam. That is why authors like Ernest Hemingway are so well read in that age. But shortly after the age of 19, after the state exam, the taste differences grow rapidly, and young men from 20 to 30 and young women at the same age have the greatest gap between the taste measured in how many books do they have in the top 100 most read at that age. I guess it is because they have very different interests at that age, and then it converges back to quite same books, and that is because at the age of 30 they start to borrow children books. Both men and women borrow books for their kids to read them.
What did your data reveal about how Prague residents actually use the library network? Do they tend to stick to their local branch, or do they travel across the city for their books?
They basically stick to their local branch. The standard user goes to 2 branches a year. out of 50. But I have found some, let's say, super users, people who visit most of the branches, so 25 and more in a year. There is around 12 of them, and not surprisingly, most of the super users are small kids or people who are retired, so they have enough time to travel across Prague and borrow books from different branches.
Your analysis also revealed something interesting about library cards. What led you to conclude that many cards are actually shared by several members of the same household?
It is quite different to say how many cards are shared, but one reason I think that is because people from the library told me that it is quite common. A woman is, let's say, manager of the family cards, and she borrows the card to the husband, to the kids, and then pays the fee every year. And from the data point of view, I found that in 1% of the cases, books like 50 Shades of Grey, erotic literature, was borrowed by kids under 10, usually not interested in such a genre. So it is safe to conclude that, for example, the kid was given the card during a school trip to the library, and then a parent was interested in some adult reading and used the card to borrow it.
What do your data tell us about how often people actually use the library? How many books does a typical reader borrow in a year?
The typical reader borrows 9 books every year. One half borrows less, one half more. And when I say that, I'm counting only people who have borrowed at least one book a year. I don't see people who have a card but they don't go to the library in my data. Definitely there are people that have a library card and they don't go there.
How much do readers' habits actually follow the calendar year? Were there any seasonal trends that particularly surprised you?
There was basically nothing surprising. It was almost calming to observe the trends. After a new year, people are interested in improving themselves, so they borrow books about healthy cooking, diets, sports, or personal productivity. Then with each January week, the interest in these topics goes down. Before the summer break, people borrow books like detective novels and travel guides, so basically things that help them relax during the summer. After the summer break, when the school begins again, it is quite well visible that some kids struggle in the school and the parents borrow things about logopedy, about various speech difficulties. And then before Christmas, people start to be interested in biblical stories and the Christmas itself, carols and so on.
And finally, I also wanted to mention some of the titles that were among the most borrowed ones over the past 3 years. What were they and what do they tell us about Czech readers today?
Well, the most borrowed book by far was The Diary of a Wimpy Kid, which is an international bestseller, but there is a catch. It is not one book, it is a series of books, like 20 books, and they all have the same title in the data. And the most read novel for adults was Leaning Church by Czech writer Karin Lednická, which is a novel set in the 19th and the 20th century, covering difficult lives of people in North Moravian region. And this is a topic that the most borrowed books have in common. They usually cover the hard lives of our ancestors in eras that were much more difficult to live through than it is today.
Michal Kašpárek, thank you very much for coming.
Thanks a lot.
A reminder that you're with Czechia in 30 minutes, a half hour of news, current affairs, and interesting stories brought to you by Radio Prague International. Before we go, here is something that may be of interest to our listeners.
This is Radio Prague, Czechoslovakia.
On the occasion of our 90th anniversary, Radio Prague International has decided to celebrate this milestone with you. Our voice has been broadcast to the world for 9 decades. Now it is time for your voice to be heard on our program. Tell us your story. Why do you listen to Radio Prague International? Since when have you known Radio Prague International, and what does Radio Prague International mean to you today? And last but not least, choose one story from our archive and tell us why it resonated with you. And how to participate? You can either send us an email at english@radio.cz with a recording answering the questions above, send us your phone number so we can call you and record your answers, or send us your answers in written form and we will read them for you. Your responses can be anonymous, or they can include your name if you wish. In any case, they will become a central part of our special broadcast culminating in August, the month when Radio Prague International was established in 1936. For 90 years, our station has been broadcasting stories of people, places and events that we believe would be valuable to you. Now, in these uncertain times, more than ever, it is your story that would be of value to us. Share it with us, share it with the world. The floor is yours.
Up to 70% of former prisoners in the Czech Republic end up returning to jail, often because they lack access to housing, work, addiction treatment, or family support after release. A new online platform launching this autumn aims to change that by connecting former inmates with organizations that can help them rebuild their lives. Daniela Lazarova has the details.
Around 10,000 people are released from Czech prisons every year. Many of them have nowhere to go, and the stigma of their past makes it difficult for them to find a job and a decent place to live. Jana, who served an 18-month sentence for property-related crimes, says that what helped her most at the outset was emotional support and acceptance.
To byli určitě lidi, u kterých jsem cítila podporu a ne odsouzení.
At the beginning, it was so important to find people who supported me rather than judged me, and who made me feel I was still a human being, that I deserved to be happy again and live a fulfilling life.
Zasloužím být zase šťastná a prostě žít spokojeně.
Jana's greatest challenge was overcoming her drug addiction. While still serving her sentence, she entered a treatment program in Opava.
Tušila jsem, že to nezvládám, ty drogy, proto jsem aj byla ráda, že mě zavřeli.
I realized I couldn't manage my drug problem alone. In fact, I was glad I was imprisoned. While there, I was already arranging where I would go after my release, and I secured a place in a follow-up treatment center in Brno.
Takže jsem si domluvila dolečovací centrum v Brně.
That helped her break the cycle. Today, she returns to prisons to help others fighting addiction. Addiction is one of the most common issues prisoners need help addressing, but there are many others, according to Jonáš Lučný of the Czech Prison Service.
Každý to má jinak, mají problémy se závislostí, mají problémy s dluhy, s financema.
Everyone's situation is different. Some struggle with addiction, debts, financial problems, or lack the work habits needed to succeed on the job market. Many also have fractured family and social ties and have nowhere to go. The first weeks after release are often decisive. If these people fail to get support at least in the basic areas of everyday life, they will almost certainly return to criminal activity.
Tak to selže 100% a vrátí se k té kriminální činnosti.
Support for released prisoners currently comes mainly from non-profit organizations. The prison service works with some of them, but its reach is uneven across the country. Most support programs are concentrated in Prague and surrounding areas, while services remain limited in South Bohemia and South Moravia. Zuzana Tinglová, Executive Director of the Association of Organizations Working in Prison Services, says the new platform aims to change that.
Určitě platí to, že ta kapacita těch služeb je regionální.
The capacity of these services is not only highly uneven across the regions, but insufficient overall. At the same time, one of the big problems is simply a lack of information. We would like the new platform to cover the whole country and be available to family members, professionals working with clients, such as social curators, probation officers and prison staff, so they can provide effective support.
Pracovníkům věznic, aby mohli klientům vlastně efektivně pomáhat.
The website called Pro výstup will offer a nationwide directory of services covering employment assistance, housing, debt resolution, family counselling and addiction treatment. Users will be able to search for services by location, district, and available capacity. The platform is currently being tested in prisons in Břeclav, Drahonice, and Příbram, with results expected by the end of the summer. It is expected to become available nationwide this autumn.
And that report by Daniela Lazarova brings us to the end of today's program here on Radio Prague International. For more news, features, interviews, photos, and videos from Czechia, visit our website at www.radio.cz. You can also browse our full archive of broadcasts and follow us on Facebook, X, and Instagram. From me, Anna-Marie Regner, thank you for listening, and goodbye.